はい。
Welcome to the first bonus episode of the FanyuFanme podcast. With these bonus episodes, we're going to distance ourselves a little from the original podcast. In fact, you might say we are going to social distance ourselves, just like stunt Pooh-san and Yuzu did at the 2020 Japan Nationals, and then Yuzu's gloves and Yuzu did in 2021. Each bonus episode in the There's a Global Pandemic series focuses on a key Yuzu event that has happened since the cancellation of Worlds 2020. The cancellation where so many Fanyus, myself included, had to accept that the printed email confirmation that once was an invaluable ticket foreshadowing what was to come had overnight turned into nothing but proof that they were going to see Yuzu perform Seimei in person. I will never get over it. Never. But I digress, as tends to happen when I talk about Seimei or Yuzu. During the different episodes in this series, I'll talk about the Skate Forward video where Yuzu saved our sanity by skating for us while wearing shoes indoors, the 2020 ISU Awards, where it looked like the ISU was going to give an award to anyone but Yuzu, Yuzu's decision to keep his jacket on to save the world by withdrawing from the 2020-2021 Grand Prix Series, his triumphant return to the 2020 Japan Nationals, where he exhausted the Fanyus with his awesomeness, his adultness brought on by the first 7 notes of Blinding Lights, his gift to Worlds when he picked up a flower and our hearts with Hanawa Saku, and even the infamous Scream on Ice. But in this episode, I'm talking Yuzu current events. The 2021 Japan Nationals, the Christmas gifts Yuzu gave us, and everything about them that made me still love Yuzu.
せーの。
There's still a global pandemic, and I still love Yuzu. Yes, I still love Yuzu, even though he didn't completely land the quad axel at the Japan Nationals. It was a historic and festive week in figure skating land as we all welcomed Yuzu back from injury and apparently also an illness of which we were mercifully left in the dark about until he was better. And Yuzu didn't just show up to the Christmas party at the last minute. Well, kinda. But at least he didn't come empty-handed. He didn't even plan on re-gifting his Let Me Entertain You costume. No, Yuzu arrived at the door wearing his Ghana red scarf and with an armload of perfectly wrapped packages and a few wardrobe bags, asking when we were going to gather around the tree and unwrap the gifts. And what was in the very first box? Oh, nothing much. Just the quad axle. The competition hadn't even started. It was the first practice. And before we knew it, we Fanyus found ourselves asking each other, what were you doing when Yuzu nearly landed the quad axle? Some of us were baking, and subsequently burning, Christmas cookies. Some of us were finishing pre-holiday work at the office. Some of us were on our couches watching Twitter for a Yuzu crumb photo, only to be jolted off our ottomans with tweets of, Yuzuru Hanyu has just landed the quad axle. Later, Fanyu tweets of life's regrets started rolling in. I didn't think anything was going to happen. I figured it was just a practice. I don't know what I'll do if he lands the quad axle in a competition. But the real question is, what will you do if Yuzu doesn't land the quad axle? Because this is where your true Fanyu colors shine through. Are you a pink Haru Yokoi sleeve, sheer and treacherously primed to rip at the slightest snag? Or are you purple LGC pants of sin that will cling to Yuzu for dear life no matter how he knee slides across the ice? My point is, hasn't he already done enough? Isn't he already enough? I can't lie. As much as I really want Yuzu to accomplish this feat and achieve his dream, I've been a little selfish regarding how soon I want this to happen. It's like having a friend apply for a job on the other side of the world. You hope they get what they want, but you don't want to lose them. This is how I have been feeling about Yuzu and the quad axle. I want this dream to come true for him more than anything, but I only wanted a Sekisei beauty blog whisper more than I want to keep watching him skate for as long as possible. But then, I spent an hour with Yuzu in the backstage warm-up area before the free skate at the Japan Nationals, and after that, no amount of selfishness could have prevented me from desperately wanting him to land it. Immediately. Obviously, I don't mean I was really with Yuzu backstage, but through the magic of technology, it certainly felt that way. I've talked about the wonders of the backstage camera. You can move yourself to watch Yuzu no matter where he is in the warm-up room, unless, of course, he's hiding behind his suitcase, for which I wouldn't blame him if he did. As I played Keep Yuzu in the Camera shot, I got progressively more concerned. It started low-key enough with Yuzu's unbelievable calm before the storm cool. As he walked back and forth in front of the camera, you could even hear the soles of his shoes squeak. It was virtual reality Yuzu, and that is technology I can do something with. But as the time before the group warm-up grew shorter and shorter, and other skaters filtered out of the room, we were left with Yuzu, and Yuzu was left with the quad axle. As I watched him pop the jump, and pace, squeak, and pace, squeak, and scuff the floor and talk to himself, I thought, this is heartbreaking. Deep down, we all know this is what Yuzu is doing every day, or in the middle of the night, during his training. But there was something about watching it and hearing it as it was happening. The real-time battle between Yuzu and the quad axle, in what felt like a very private argument. I thought I should excuse myself saying, I think I need to give you two a minute alone. But I think maybe Yuzu and the quad axle have been alone together for too long. The problem is, they aren't really alone. There's another set of squeaky shoes in the room, and they belong to expectation. On the left foot is the world's expectations. On the right foot, of course, is Yuzu's. I've never been more struck by how fine the line is between support and pressure, and I've never had a more difficult time trying to navigate it. I don't think I'm the only Fanyu currently trying to perfect this skill. On one hand, I'm completely and totally concerned for Yuzu's health, safety, and sanity if he keeps this up much longer. It worries me that our support has crossed over the line into pressure, if not knocking on the door of unreasonable and inhumane pressure. Comments about how he is perfect, so he is definitely going to land it and definitely going to win the Olympics. We do remember one of those things is completely out of his hands and in the hands of pure evil, right? Statements that Yuzu is the only person who could ever land it, so he has to do it. Of course he is the only person who could ever land it. But does that mean he's required to kill himself in doing so? I mean, I know Yuzu feels responsible for everyone, everywhere, about everything, ever. But the more pictures that surface of a clearly distressed and exhausted Yuzu, the more I want to yell, "Look at what we're doing to Yuzu!" And then hearing Yuzu use words like broken and scared and frantic, I want to yell, "Stop!" But on the other hand, I want to yell, "Stop!" at all the people yelling at Yuzu to stop. I want Yuzu to get absolutely every single thing he wants. And like Pooh-san, I trust Yuzu. Is there a more conscientious, thoughtful, informed person when it comes to figure skating? Or truly anything at all? Who knows figure skating and its physiology better than Yuzu? I mean, If I sprained my figure skating and you told me to go see a specialist, I would try to schedule an appointment with Dr. Hanyu. I think I'll give us all a second on that one. Who am I to tell him what he should be doing? I would never claim to have the knowledge to coach him on how to do it. So what makes me think I have the knowledge to tell him if he should do it? If he wants to achieve it, let him do it. It's just up to us to stand rinkside holding his skate guards and yelling, "Ganbate, Yuzu!" and possibly gently encouraging the use of a helmet. But this balancing act between support and pressure is dividing the Fanyus. And even when thinking about this podcast, I've been conflicted. How do I express that I care enough about Yuzu to want him to release himself from this demand, but that I care enough about Yuzu to support him in doing what he wants? It's slippery, and I just hope I don't fall and starfish across the ice only to skid to a stop at Yuzu's feet. Wait, I might be okay with that, but I think you know what I mean. All that's left to do is to say, I love you, Yuzu. I support you 100%, win, lose, or quad axle. I also still love Yuzu, even when his costume is blue. I was appalled at some of the reactions rolling in mere seconds after his new short program costume was revealed, despite it not being in the usual unjacketing ritual. There were demands for him to explain himself, uses of the words hideous. 1, Yuzu doesn't have to explain himself to anyone, much less about what he chooses to wear. 2, no piece of clothing or hairstyle could ever warrant using the word hideous when it relates to Yuzu. 3, if you're this horrified, do us all a favor and move along. There are other certain figure skaters wearing mustard splats. I'm sure there's plenty of room at his picnic table. Most of all, this is Yuzu. If you claim to be a fan, please behave like one. If you had a friend who bought a new dress you thought was awful, and they asked you what you thought, you'd still try to be kind. You might say, you know, you looked really great in the dark purple one. Or, I think I'd like it better without the choker. You wouldn't tell them to their face they look hideous. And you do realize this is essentially what you're doing to Yuzu, just behind a social media mask. On top of everything else he's dealing with, does he really need to see this kind of petty hate from his own fans as he rides back to the hotel after pounding his soul into the ice, trying to live up to our expectations of him? To be clear, I'm not saying you can't have an opinion. I'm just saying you have to have decency. Did we learn nothing from the khaki suit of sin? Was I hoping for something very different? Yes. Did I envision a dramatic red masquerade-esque costume? Yes. Did it only take one beautiful picture of Yuzu in that costume before I was on Team Choker Tonal Stellata? Yes. I am so there now, Yuzu. So there. Best of all, I love that he chose to wear that costume for the opening of the Medalists on Ice Gala. So, you hated my new costume? Well, guess what? Here it is again. While it wouldn't bother me at all to think that he did it out of spite, I know that is incredibly unlikely motivation for why he wore it. I think it was probably more like trying to sell someone a car. Are you sure you don't want to test drive this one again? He knows he wears that costume beautifully, and that it's just taking some of us a little longer to see it than others. Don't worry, Yuzu. I'm sure they'll come around eventually. Maybe if you throw in a complimentary set of floor mats. Most importantly, Yuzu needs us right now. Whether you think he's skating too close to the quad axle hole or not, when he reaches out a hand for help, you give it. You don't just look down at him in the hole and say, I told you going near that hole was a bad idea. P.S. Your costume is ugly. No, you give him your dang hand. In fact, I feel like we need to start a Fanyu sign-up list of who is making chicken noodle gyoza for Yuzu each day between now and the Olympics. Because Yuzu needs all the TLC he can get over the next month to prepare for what is coming. And he's not the only one. You know who else needs some serious preparation time? The Fanyus. CloneMe shared the announcement of Yuzu's Beijing Olympic attendance with the comment, "We only have 1 month to mentally prepare for this." My response? 1,000 years wouldn't be enough time to mentally prepare for this. Before I even knew for sure that Yuzu was going, I had been watching television and saw the Olympic rings under the NBC logo. "Why are those there?" I asked. And then it hit me. The Olympics are coming. And not just the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. And not just the Winter Olympics, the Winter Olympics after the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. The 3rd consecutive Winter Olympics. And you all know what I'm alluding to by using the words 3rd consecutive. And I suddenly feel like throwing up. But here we are, 4 years after the Pyeongchang Olympics. And as we head into 2022, we're starting to sound a bit like Sesame Street. This year is brought to you by the number 4 and the letter A. It's a number and a letter, but put it on a piece of paper, hand it to the ISU, and it becomes something else entirely. While it might become a dream, a hope, an expectation, a challenge, a fear, one thing it doesn't become is an eraser. Without the quad axle, Yuzu is still the Yuzu who won 2 consecutive Olympic gold medals. Without the quad axle, Yuzu is still the Yuzu who sent us into dark corners after Masquerade and Blinding Lights. Without the quad axle, Yuzu is still the Yuzu who apologized to a pair of gloves for almost forgetting them in the kiss and cry. Without the quad axle, Yuzu is still the Yuzu who is skating for us. So Yuzu, no matter what number is in front of that letter, you are still Yuzu, and we love you. No matter the score, the jump, or the costume, we love you because you are Yuzu, and you are already, and will always be, enough. But for now, here, take my hand.
完成です。
If you don't want to miss any future bonus episodes, make sure you subscribe to Yuzuru Hanyu is my emergency contact, the FanyuFanme podcast. Or you can always find FanyuFanme on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Redbubble, or the official website with the blog that started it all at FanyuFanme.com. Come back for the next bonus episode of There's a Global Pandemic, the series where our hearts are with Yuzu, but even they know to still stay 6 feet away. The FanyuFanme podcast is a Back to the Forest production.
Back to the forest? Just kidding.